pass that first.
Okay, friends, come on down, grab your seats, get some last snacks, because we are not feeding you enough. We'll have more treats in a break after this, but grab your seats quick. We got some fun ahead of us. First, with my awkward full hands every time, join me in giving a round of applause to our 5 different groups that were leading the workshops. Thank you all so much. Thank you, presenters who prepared. Thank you, attendees who went and asked great questions. I've already heard good things about it. I know I learned a lot in the chat GPT, maybe a little scared, but learned a lot. Okay. So we're back to the afternoon session that I get to facilitate is the stories, and the stories that shape us, where we get to hear stories from some of our staff. In this specific time, we're going to hear about mentoring, the power of mentorship. It's a key means for growth and development, and it really has an incredible impact. And these 2 men up here with me are going to share about that. Part of it is, historically, we all know there's spaces in the world that have had apprenticeships and master-apprentice relationships. There's also the fact that that style of training is kind of a lost art, but there's an aspect that mentoring really accelerates learning. It invests your knowledge into someone else, and it really allows you to share your knowledge and that wisdom and accelerate someone else's growth. And that's part of what we're going to hear about as these gentlemen up here share. Today we're going to hear from mentor and mentee Dave Weir and SK Tran, and the role of mentors and their journey. So let's give them a warm welcome. Okay, so as our first question, we're going to get to know you as usual. So Dave, could you start by introducing yourself?
Yes, well, you saw me before lunch. Yay.
Can't get enough. Keep going.
Been with CRU almost 30 years, and been in the nonprofit space for a little over 40. In between my 2 CRU times, I was with another charity called Teen Challenge of Florida as our CFO, so lots of nonprofit experience. Currently, as I think you know, I'm on the SFL team, and I oversee UNTU's and Inner Cities finances. And the cool thing is 4 of the 5 ministries that I've done in this role, I've done a total of 5. 4 of the 5 of them are here. So I need to take just a quick second. The Inner City representative, Dan Howe, is not here. If you think about him sometime this week, say a prayer. He's handling the affairs of his mom, who passed away last week, and her funeral. I think one of the 2 services is today, I believe, and then there's another one tomorrow. So if you think about Dan, if you do know him, say a prayer. He's a great brother, so he's the Inner City Operations Director, and he normally attends these. So anyway, I have the privilege of seeing 4 of the 5 that I've been involved with. Enjoy the consultation, partnership, and service aspect of being on the SFL team. As far as family, got 3 sons and a bunch of grandkids.
That's great. SK, could you tell us a little about yourself?
Yes, check Norris. My name's SK Tran, and SK stands for Smoothie King. I'm just kidding. So my Chinese name is Sing Gung, but I go by SK here at CRU. I came to CRU about 5.5 years ago. Before that, I worked at a global accounting firm called PwC, and I recently got married a little bit over a year ago, and I still enjoy I still enjoy date nights on Thursdays, which I call Friday Junior. So
it's awesome. Okay, guys, we're going to hear a little bit about mentorship and your mentorship relationship, SK. Why did you seek out a mentor in the first place, and why reach out to Dave?
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Actually, full disclosure, Dave, I didn't seek you out first, and it's not that he wasn't my first choice. It was really I was just
Surprises.
seeking. Yes, I was seeking guidance. I was seeking direction. I was going to be a new team leader, and it was going to be a transition for me. So I wanted some extra help, and so I sought out leaders like Keith Anderson, Paul Alexander, Kevin, Dave Strachan, Beth. So I wanted to have like the Thanos of like mentors of all these different strengths that I had. But really, it wasn't sustainable to meet with all those mentors and continue to do my work full time. And so I talked to Kevin, and he said, "Hey, you should talk to Dave Weir. He's looking to pour into other staff like you." And so I asked Dave. I sent a calendar invite for a Thai restaurant, and then I titled it "How to Build Relational Equity with Others." That was the title. And so in the lines of Casablanca, I think it was the start of a beautiful friendship ever since then. So, yes.
That's great. Okay, Dave, with that as your invitation, what had you saying yes? Seriously, what had you say yes to mentoring SK?
Well, I'm really hurt, SK, that you...
This is spicier than yesterday's.
That was not your first choice. I'm crushed. No, I did know that he had lots of people pouring into his life, and I know that Kevin recommended that if he wanted to try to connect with me, he could. So, yeah, I'm glad I said yes, and the reason I said yes mainly is SK asked. It was that simple. So apply that to your lives. I mean, we're hoping that this session encourages a lot of folks to seek some type of mentorship, formal or informal. But yeah, I said yes, appreciate that SK asked. I do enjoy kind of the teaching component that it involves, the coaching, the just passing on of knowledge and life and experience. And SK is really awesome to have in this type of arrangement. He takes tons of notes and he applies things that we talk about. So it's a great mentee.
So Dave, you just covered some of them, but what are the benefits of seeking a mentor? And in your view, what defines a mentor?
Yeah, great question. What I see is maybe the most obvious benefit is that the mentee can learn and grow in real time from real life experiences, by learning from someone else's experiences, right? The good and the bad. So what I like most about it, it's not theoretical. I mean, SK brings real questions to the table. Hopefully I can answer a lot of them. Can't answer everything. But it's real time, and it's real stuff. It's not out of a book. It's where SK is on whatever day that we're meeting. And I think there's benefit into experiencing that. Also, there's immediate application for SK. He applies stuff. He's really faithful to do stuff. We talk about it the next time. And then another benefit is, follow-up is available. We work in the same office, so that's really great. But one other item, for context, I'm a context person. I really enjoy the intersection of kingdom design and everyday life. I love matching those up. And so that's kind of that's part of the flavor of our time.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Okay, next, my question is for both of you, but maybe SK can start. But we want to hear from both of you. Can you share how mentoring has helped you both grow personally?
Yes, it's ginormous. I originally reached out to Dave for guidance on being a new team leader. I wanted to build trust with my team. And one of the first stories he shared with me was his time in Teen Challenge. I won't go into details, but basically he shared a story where he had made a mistake and he owned up to it by saying, "I was wrong, I was sorry." And just having him here saying like the words "I'm sorry" or "I was wrong," it was really like foreign to me as a leader. I thought I always had to be right. I always had to have the right answer. And just being human, having that humility and staying humble is one thing I took away on my first meetings with Dave. And I really appreciate how he's realistic with it. He's not just talking in theory. He's telling real examples of how he learned from his mistakes, and I can apply that to my leadership. And so that's one thing I took away, is just his humility, just observing his character. But in a practical sense too, one of the most important advice he told me is the importance of listening. And so there's a reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Because we should listen more. And so as a leader, I think it's a misconception that you have to give all the direction, just keep talking and giving all the right answers. But it's really, as a leader, you should really be listening a lot more. And so I really took that to heart, and I think that really changed the trajectory of my leadership style, and I'm glad I got to connect with Dave.
Awesome. Thanks,
What
SK.
about you, Dave? Yes, I can repeat the question. Happy to do so. Can you share how mentoring, either experiencing it as the mentor or the mentee in other times in your life, but how it's helped you grow personally?
Sure. Thank you. I think for me, it's just, one, it's an honor and a pleasure to be connected with the mentoring and coaching relationships I have. SK, like I said, it's an honor to be in his space and in his life. With that said, it's a humbling space. You know, for me, there's a reverence to it when he asks for my opinion on something. I don't want to be flippant. I don't want to be casual. You know, I want to respect and revere his space and his life. So that's what it does for me, and it keeps me just making sure my posture is correct and my posture is right. Yeah, so there's a lot of benefits for me as well.
I want to add, outside of that, Dave also always closes and opens in prayer for me, and that's been ginormous for me. It's not just a check-the-box thing. He really cares about me on a deeper level than just work. So that really helped the mentorship, just build trust and caring for me, and likewise. So.
Thanks. Thanks, both of you. Okay, when we think about professional growth happens in the good stuff and the bad stuff, the triumphs and the challenges. So how have you seen mentoring contribute to someone's professional development over time, Dave?
I think what helps, and SK alluded to this already, is in addition to sharing perhaps some successes I've had in my work life over the last 40 years, is to also share my fails. You know, I shared with someone else recently, man, let me fail for you. You know, I've already failed back then. So on this particular subject that you've brought up, don't do that. Don't do what I did in that particular moment, you know. So hopefully some of my fails in the past will help, you know, SK and others not fail today. So I think that's important to not just share the successes, what has worked in a particular situation, whether it be work or personal, and then also just being vulnerable. SK alluded to that a little bit. You know, it's not sterile at all. It's real. I look at it as an ongoing conversation, you know, matching, again, like I said, kingdom design with our everyday life, just living in that intersection. And then also, for me, I think just having a genuine interest in SK. I mean, I care about his life, his journey professionally, care about his, you know, his personal life, his relatively new wife, and everything. It's more than just like SK said. We're not just checking boxes.
Thanks so much for sharing, Dave. So SK, what role has mentorship played in your own professional development, as he shared a little bit of contributing, and how has it influenced your approach to success and navigating transitions?
When you read that question, the first thing that came to mind was a phrase Dave talked about. I never heard it before, but it's you don't have to die on that hill. And I was like, what does that mean? I've heard some people say that before, but I didn't really know what that meant. So it's like, even though you may have a strong opinion about something, like it's not worth like trying to fight and try to be right about. And so like, I was like, wow, that definitely applies to my marriage. I'm definitely trying to be right too much. But it also applied professionally, where it's like, okay, a decision has been made. I might disagree with something, but ultimately I don't need to die on that hill. I can get on board, I can be aligned. It's not something that's worth trying to be right about. And so I really thought about that phrase professionally, being a leader especially. And then I also want to shout out Keith Anderson as my mentor too. He's continuing to be my mentor. He told me I don't have to anticipate every question my team will ask and try to explain everything in my first sentence. Like I can just be prepared for the questions, but I don't have to answer the question they didn't even ask yet. So like I had this trying to anticipate people's needs and try to over-explain things. And so really Keith helped me set my pace, set my tone, to be more calm and collected. And so I just want to say thank you, Keith, for that advice as well. So that helped me professionally, those two things.
Thanks. Okay, another one for both of you. Maybe Dave could start this one also. What practical advice would you give to someone in this room who might be looking to become a mentor or to find a mentor?
Got it. I've got four parts to my answer here. I have taken notes.
Okay, buckle up.
As the mentor, and I hope some of you pursue this if you're not already, focus on the mentee. You know, it's all about them. It really is. If it ever becomes about me, something's wrong. Something's backward. So, look, SK, I love making our meeting times all about you. So hopefully I've demonstrated that. As a result, I think it's important to be a model. Be vulnerable, be humble, be available. Not just in the meeting times that we have, but all the time. So, and also to commit to an ongoing arrangement. If you decide you want to enter that, make sure it's ongoing, and then stay connected outside of those quote unquote official times. You know, it's important to really lean in. You know, care about the person's life and journey, and impart what they're willing to absorb.
Thanks. Anything that you'd add, Dave, for someone who's looking to find a mentor, like the other side? Any advice?
I'd say, you know, be willing to learn. I know SK is just a sponge. Yeah, be willing to learn, be willing to apply, and, you know, and take it seriously.
Thanks. SK, what about someone who's looking to find a mentor? Start with that one.
I would start with prayer and just thinking about someone that you trust, someone that maybe is in a position that you want to be in the future. These things that you can consider. I would also consider maybe someone outside of your supervisory role, so someone that's outside of your direct work line, so that you can just be honest and open about anything that you might disagree with. So you can have that more of a free flowing, like being frank, right? You don't have to have all this political red tape. You can just be real with your mentor. And then, yeah, I wouldn't do what I would do, just try to find like a bunch of mentors and just try to cast your line. It wasn't my intention in the beginning. It really just stemmed from I was just seeking direction, and I just knew, hey, I knew Beth was really great at time management, delegating, and I wanted to learn about her and how she did that. So I just asked her, and then I knew like Keith was at SFL at one point, and so I was like, I want to be at SFL one day, so I'm gonna reach out to him. And then Kevin's like, oh, he's really great at connecting with people. Let me ask Kevin how he does that. So it kind of just happened organically, and then I was like, I can't keep meeting monthly and telling the same stories to each party. And so then I found Dave Weir, and then yeah, it's the start of a beautiful friendship. Yes.
So maybe hone in on your goals and your expectations and look for one at a time.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything you'd say for someone who might be open to being a mentor on the other receiving end that you could give advice to them? For you, SK.
Oh.
What would you want to receive if you reached out to someone else?
So my advice for the mentor? Okay. What them to know is...
I didn't prep them for this. Clearly surprising him.
Yeah, I would want them to know is I'm still learning. I'm not perfect, and like, just have grace with me. I think that would be the biggest thing I want the mentor to know is like, please don't make it feel like I'm getting punished if I did something wrong. Like, just have an expounding grace side as you're mentoring.
That's great. Thanks.
One
You
more
have
thought.
something to add? Yeah.
I forgot to mention one thing. Yeah, SK mentioned trust. Trust is huge. You know, what we talk about his journey, that, I mean, I don't blab that around and share that with other people. It's important to have that confidentiality to build that trust.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Before I close us, do y'all have either of you have any last things that you'd like to share as a takeaway for anybody in the room on the topic of mentoring relationships, finding a mentor, being a mentor? Anything you feel like you haven't gotten to?
Yeah, I want to share a story. When I was looking for leadership advice, Dave Weir gave me this DVD with Ike, and it was his leadership style during, was it World War II or World War II? And, sorry. And so,
Dave is a huge World War II fan. Huge.
Yep.
We should all know.
I was surprised to learn of how Ike really listened to his leadership, his leaders that he had around the boardroom, and asked them each of their opinions before making a decision. And even there's a scene where he tries to like recruit a French general or something to help them, and he declines. But he doesn't die on that hill. He doesn't keep pleading with that person. He realizes this is the end. He's not going to change this person's mind he's going to move on from there. And I thought that was a really great scene for me because as a leader, I just want to be a way maker. I want to, like, there's no such thing as no, you know, like I'm just going to keep going whatever it takes. But in that sense, like I just saw that leadership of like letting things go and being okay with that and finding other solutions. So that was really eye-opening for me to watch another person have that leadership style play out. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that story, SK. I appreciate it. Dave, what
Yeah.
about you? Any last thoughts?
Sure, just one more thing for me. Yeah, go for it. Really consider it. Pray about it. You can't lose, right? Just make sure your heart's in the right place. Ask God to cross your path with someone, and just give yourself to it. Think of your own personal journeys with work and with life. You have a reservoir of experience you can pass on, a reservoir of wisdom and insight, and you're passing it on already to others, I'm sure. But if you can really focus that into a few of these type of connections, I mean, there's a lot of benefit to be passed on. So give it some thought.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's not like class, like it's another homework assignment I have to do for Dave, right? It's something fun that I enjoy. I have genuine, joy from it. So, yeah, and Dave makes me laugh all the time.
Thanks, guys. Well, let's all thank them. Thanks, Dave and SK, for sharing. Still haven't mastered how I'm supposed to do that with all these things. Okay, seriously, thanks for sharing your insights. You've really given us a great picture and shown us that it can be more than just about one thing. It can be more than guidance. It can be connection, growth, resilience together. It's an opportunity for us to consider, and each of us to look for opportunities, even if it's not a formalized relationship, but ways we can invest in others and ways we can seek out and be invested in. So I'll let y'all stay up here with me. I'm going to give you some directions for the break, and I don't see any hints from the back, so I'm going to go with what I got. Okay, we're going to have a break until a time that I tell you at the end. I don't know. We're going to have a break, and there should be some extra fun new treats outside like yesterday. And I don't have any notes on allergens. Oh, yes, I do. It's like they're coming specials for me. Vegan and gluten-free options are available and labeled. So please don't hold back. We have a break until 3:10. Lord, let that be true. Okay, I don't even know what time it is, but you have a break. Talk amongst yourselves, take a mental break. Sorry, it's been speedy through your workshops into this, but we hope you have a good time. I'm assuming it's all set up out there where we normally set up things, and we'll see you back in here at 3:10. For Wells Fargo, our guest is speaking at that time. Thanks. Like I'm gonna keep fluffing it. Yeah.
Oh, 5 minutes.
So if you'll flip the bottom thing, the words will go off right here. Need help? You see it?
Welcome back. Come on in.
Hey, friends in the hallway, call your friends in. Andy, turn around and go back for more. As he chuckles, doesn't make eye contact.
I think during the break, some of us got colder staying inside eating our Italian ice. But the smart people, I saw them outside in the sun, maybe with their ice, but they look probably less frigid cold than the rest of you.
That's a great
during
idea.
the break, you may have also seen on the panels and little TV monitors outside, there was a QR code that may go up on the screen behind me as well right now. Kent is going to be doing our final session of the day, and he is ready and willing to answer your questions if only you would submit them via the QR code. So you see it now. We'll take it down in a few minutes, and then you'll see it again when Kent gets back up on stage. So if you have questions for him, please let him know via the QR code. So as we transition to this session, in finance, we spend a lot of time thinking about stewardship and stewarding our resources well. And in today's digital space, that stewardship includes cyber threats. So cyber threats are evolving at an alarming pace, and the risks we face become more sophisticated over time with phishing scams and AI deepfakes. The cyber criminals are having new ways to exploit organizations, compromise sensitive data, and disrupt operations. So critical to understanding these risks is learning how to protect ourselves and the ministries that we serve, which we're going to talk about today.
Thanks, Valerie. As she said, our next session is designed to pull back the curtain on some of those modern cyber threats. And many of the things we'll explore are things she just mentioned that are common tactics used by cyber criminals to gain access to that critical information, the rise of AI-driven fraud, insights on how we can protect our teams and our organizations. So we're honored to have Justin Ellerman from Wells Fargo here with us today. Before joining Wells Fargo in 2019, he had previous roles in other international financial institutions. He has tons of experience focusing on cyber incident response, privacy operations, and cybersecurity strategy. With extensive expertise in cybersecurity and fraud innovation, Justin's going to help us understand not just how cyber attacks happen, but how we can defend against them. So please join us in welcoming Justin. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Afternoon, everyone. As they mentioned, my name is Justin Ellerman. I'm with Wells Fargo's cybersecurity. I'm the head of cyber advisory services, so I'm kind of like the external face of Wells Fargo's cybersecurity program. So I speak with a lot of our clients, a lot of our customers, really just to bring awareness around today's cyber threats because it's bad out there, and really, I don't envision it getting any better anytime soon, especially with the emergence of new technology like AI. So, one of the biggest things we can bring is awareness around what those threats are and how to spot some of those red flags and how to, bring it to your, IT leadership and say, hey, I see something, say something, right? And so, when we move into the next slide, today I just want to kind of talk about, that current cyber threat landscape. What are the main threats that we're seeing out there? What Wells Fargo is doing about cybersecurity, and then, kind of talk about a couple case studies, some recent incidents that we've seen in the past, because, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways to learn. How are these cyber criminals attacking or other organizations? Because what they're doing, and if it's working, they're going to continue to use those same tactics and techniques. But, really the biggest thing I want to bring today is, a lot of that awareness, actionable things that you can be doing at work, at home, in your personal lives, bringing a lot of this information also to your family, because at the end of the day, if you have money, if you have information, you're a potential target, no matter if you have $100 in your checking account or you're, part of the Forbes, 500, right? The top companies in the world. Everyone needs cybersecurity. I think probably 15 years ago, you would only see banks and healthcare companies have cybersecurity programs, but now everyone has a need for it. So, going to the next slide. And the next one. I got some filler slides in here, sorry. Really looking at, what the motivation of these attackers is. You know, how are they doing it? Why are they doing it? Who's doing it? And, you know, what these threats are. So when you look at, you know, hacktivists or malicious insiders or cyber criminals, really, you know, organizations like Wells Fargo, we have to worry about all of these. When you look at nation-state actors from China, Russia, North Korea, those are the ones that are trying to cause chaos and disruption. But you know, for organizations like CRU, really you have to be worried about those cyber criminals because their main motivation is money. They're going to be trying to get as much money out of you and your organizations as possible. They don't care how they do it. They don't care who they hurt, what damage they do, as long as they get money at the end of the day. And they're doing this through ransomware attacks, business email compromise, account takeover, phishing, social engineering. They have so many tools at their, that they can use to carry out a lot of their attacks. And really, they operate like a business. I do a lot of these presentations with FBI agents, and they routinely talk about how a lot of these, cyber criminals are set up in Eastern Europe and in Asia, and they work in office buildings. They have performance goals. They have performance metrics. And if something isn't working, they're going to pivot to a new technique or a tactic that does work, because at the end of the day, they're trying to get as much money as possible. So going to the next slide, when you kind of look at the top cybersecurity trends, and from like Wells Fargo's perspective, what we're tracking, for the next 10 years. Obviously, AI. With the emergence of AI, it's going to bring a lot of opportunities and efficiencies for businesses, but on the same hand, it brings a lot of opportunities and efficiencies for cyber criminals. AI allows a lot more believable phishing emails to be written really quickly. Long gone are the days of phishing emails being sent to people, with a bunch of spelling errors, bunch of grammar errors, and someone claiming that they won the lottery and they need your help to get the jackpot, right? And AI is bringing the speed and a lot of efficiency to these attacks, so they're a lot more targeted, a lot more sophisticated, a lot more believable. And then also, the next trend is vendor security. So think of any of like your third parties, anyone in your supply chain. If they're connected to your network, if they have your information, and they have bad security, then they automatically become your weakest link. About 10, 15 years ago, Target had one of the largest data breaches of that time. And a bunch of their point of sale data, so all their credit card information, every time someone was swiping a credit card, all that information was breached and stolen. And how that happened was one of their suppliers was an HVAC company, and they were connected to Target's network. Well, the attackers, they infiltrated the HVAC company, got into their network, and then there was no barrier between Target's network and the HVAC company's network, so they got right into Target's network and stole all their point-of-sale data. So it kind of just goes to show you how important it is for any suppliers, vendors that you're using, ensuring that you're doing your due diligence, that make sure that they have the same fraud protection, cybersecurity controls that you require. And then, the cyber skills gap, like I mentioned, everyone has a need for cybersecurity now. And because the demand far outweighs the supply, we're seeing a cybersecurity skills gap where every organization needs it, but there just aren't enough people to fill those roles. So I think we'll continue to see that until, more universities, colleges start adopting cybersecurity programs. We've seen it a little bit, but, we'll continue to see it for some time. To happen, right? Like again, as long as there's money, as long as there's information to be stolen, you'll continue to see cyber attacks. I don't think it's going to be going away anytime soon. And then finally, we've got end of the password, because a lot of cyber attacks are a result of passwords being stolen or infiltrated or accounts being hacked into. So when we start to see the end of the password, then hopefully we'll start to see better security and less cyber attacks. And what I mean by the end of the password, going from to passwordless technology. So you'll have kind of all your passwords on your device, and so that'll not only make your accounts more secure, but it will also ensure quicker authentication to your accounts, which will make everyone's lives a lot easier because you won't have to remember, 15 different passwords or 20 different passwords or have password managers. So hopefully that technology can be adopted as soon as possible. And just want to talk about cybersecurity at Wells Fargo. So with cybersecurity, because of, we understand that our customers and our clients, they have a choice in who they bank with. And without trust, we don't have a business. And that's why Wells Fargo spends almost $1 billion annually on cybersecurity. We have over 2,000 cybersecurity experts in our cyber program because at the end of the day, we have to be right every single time, and those cyber criminals, they only have to be right once. And so that's why we have such an emphasis, and that's why we deploy a model called defense in depth, where because of the sophistication of a lot of these cyber criminals, if they're able to bypass one control, we have multiple layers of control in place to limit what information they can get, what access, what damage they can do to our organization. And by doing that, we have, with all those layers of controls, we're better able to protect, our organization, our data. Think of it as, a castle and you have a moat. Well, there's walls and lots of moats and, alligators in those moats, right? So with all those controls in place, we're really hardening our environment. And then we're also doing things like we have what's called penetration tests or red teams, where they take the mindset of a cyber criminal and they start from outside our network, and then they will try to find any way to get in, right? Because on a monthly basis or a daily basis, we're being targeted probably tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of times by people just, pinging our network, trying to see if there's any way in, kind of the equivalent of, someone walking around your neighborhood and just jiggling the door handles of every house, or trying to see if there's any windows unlocked. And that's what, those penetration testing teams are doing, where they're trying to find any unlocked doors or open windows. And if we find them, then we're going to close them as quickly as we can. So going to the next slide. I want to talk about passwords because passwords are so important. There was a recent study that showed that the most used password that was breached was 123456. And I feel like we've all been hit over the head so many times about using strong passwords, but people still use these weak passwords because it's easy, I guess. It makes their lives simple, but it also makes the life simple for a lot of these hackers. But beyond having a strong password, multi-factor authentication is one of the best things you can do to secure accounts. And what I mean by multi-factor authentication, two of the following three things. So something like a password, something you have, like a debit card or something you are, like a face scan, finger scan, retina scan, right? So any of two of those things would be considered multi-factor authentication. And having that in place is going to add so much additional security to protecting your accounts. Microsoft, back in 2019, they came out with a study that said if 99% of all cyber attacks could have been prevented if multi-factor authentication was in place throughout the environment, because it really limits the access you get, how you're able to move horizontally within someone's network. You're not as able to get as much information because you have that multi-factor authentication in place. So if you have social media accounts, financial accounts, banking accounts, any account that allows it, go into the settings, see if you can turn on multi-factor authentication, and I highly recommend doing that. And when you kind of look at, if you're just relying on passwords, relying on, just a long password isn't enough. You have to have, add complexity to that password. Probably everyone has, if you have a password that, requires uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, I'm sure everyone's just going to come up with a number or come up with a word, and then you have a number at the end of it. And then, you think you're good. Well, the attackers know that, and they do have what are called dictionary attacks, where they have programs that are continuously running through all the different password combinations and, just checking any password that works. And then they're bound to get in because they're trying it thousands upon thousands of times. And the biggest thing is having a long password And then also adding uppercase, lowercase, special characters, numbers. And don't think of like passwords. Think of passphrases like, my name is Justin, I live in Chicago, and I work at Wells Fargo. Something like that is very easy to remember, but the biggest thing is that it's long. And then, maybe replace an L with a 1 or an S with a money symbol. Just throw in different numbers and special characters throughout your passphrase. Also consider password managers like Keeper, 1Pass, LastPass. All those password managers, they really enable you to have different passwords for all your different accounts because, say you use the same password over and over, right? You say you have like 30 different accounts, from your shopping accounts to your social media accounts, your financial accounts. If you use the same password over and over and then one of those accounts gets breached or hacked, well, now those hackers have access to all your accounts because they'll steal a database of passwords, and then they have username and password, and then they're just with their tools going around and trying all the different username and password combinations at any site that has a login, and they're bound to get in. So making sure you are using different passwords for your different accounts, and a password manager really allows you to do that. Also, when you look at what's called brute force, that's really just trying password attempt over password attempt. And when you look at how quickly with today's technology, a password with 10 characters with just numbers, it can be broken instantly with today's technology. But when you look at a password that's 16 characters that has numbers, special characters, uppercase, lowercase, it takes 5 billion years with today's technology. So, making sure that you're using, strong passphrases, using different passwords for your different accounts, and using multi-factor authentication is, really good cyber hygiene because, these attackers are doing what's called credential stuffing attack, and that's when they get a bunch of passwords and then they're just kind of spraying it out there on any website, and like I said, they're bound to get in. Also want to talk about phishing emails. I'm sure if you go into your cell phone right now and go into your email folder and go into the junk folder, it's going to be full of phishing emails. And a lot of times with these phishing emails, some are getting really good, but there's always some like telltale signs that you're dealing with a phishing email. I know ones I've been receiving a lot recently are related to like invoices. I'll receive an email saying like, here's your invoice for your recent purchase, because what these attackers want to do, they want to kind of create a sense of urgency, and you're thinking like, oh, I didn't make a purchase. Let me open up this email. Let me click on this link. Let me see what was purchased. Maybe there's fraud on my account and I need to report it, right? These attackers are creating a sense of urgency, so you let your guard down, you ignore the red flags, and you act before you think. And things you should be looking for is, who's that email coming from, right? An email is purportedly from Wells Fargo. It's not going to have a Comcast.net email domain. It's going to come from wellsfargo.com. So, looking at that email domain. Also, making sure you're reviewing, that the email is exactly what you expect it to be, because it would be incredibly easy for someone to set up a new domain where instead of, wellsfargo.com, they replace an S with a money symbol, or that L with a 1, where, at a quick glance, it looks legitimate, but in actuality, it's not. So, when you're dealing with, high value transactions, or, someone's asking you to, change wire payment instructions, making sure that you are reviewing all those details, just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I just want to confirm that the email you sent me is legitimate. I just want to, make sure that, what you're asking me to do is correct, because I think as technology advances, a lot of those tried and true methods of, just picking up the phone or, walking down to someone's office are going to become, increasingly important. And then also, like I said, they create a sense of urgency. So any email that has like alert, take action now, those are, again, telltale signs. If someone is calling you up saying that they're from your bank and they need your password, don't ever give your password out to anyone. I would say hang up the phone and then look at the number on the back of your debit card, your credit card, look on the number on your statement and call that number. Or even, Google the customer service number for whatever your financial institution is, so you can actually talk to someone that you can trust rather than, oh, I just got this email, let me call the number on the email, because then you're just going to be calling directly to those bad actors. Also, again, continue to look for grammar and spelling errors. Things like ChatGPT, they're really enabling well-written emails, but still, you're dealing, with people, and people are going to be making mistakes. And then finally, if there's a link in an email, hover over that link with your mouse, and a pop-up's going to show. If the link in the email does not match that pop-up, then again, it's most likely a phishing email, because it's going to be taking you to a site that you're not expecting. And then the next threat I want to talk about is what's called smishing, so the text message version of phishing. And I know there's been a huge uptick of smishing attacks recently related to the USPS. If you're getting text messages from the USPS saying that your package is undeliverable, or you need to click on a link, well, the first telltale sign is a text message coming from, a U.S. government entity wouldn't be coming from an international phone number. So, that's the first thing. And then, the second thing, USPS is never going to text you. They don't have your phone number, and so they're not going to text you. And then another one I've recently been getting is about unpaid tolls. I'm sure, sounds like you've all been receiving those as well. Again, anytime that you're receiving a text out of the blue and it contains a link, I would just report it as junk and don't click on any links. Because, again, it's another new tactic and technique that, at the end of the day, it works for these cyber criminals. I mean, if they send out, 10,000 of those text messages, if they get 5 people to click on it, it's going to be worth their while, because they're not, sending out text message after text message. They just have programs that just mass push these out. So the next threat on the next slide is QR code fraud. And we're starting to see a little bit more of this, because a lot more, companies, businesses, restaurants, they're relying on QR codes to quickly, get to a website, right? To quickly make a payment. But, things you need to be aware of is how easy it is to kind of fake a QR code. So think if you're, going to pay for parking, and you go to, the parking sign has a QR code. Well, if I'm a cyber criminal, I could easily make a sticker that goes over that QR code, so and create a website that looks like the parking payment site. And so every person that's going in, scans that QR code, takes them to my fraudulent site, and then they're paying for parking. Not only are they, paying for parking, but I'm getting all their credit card information, and that's really where the money is to be made. They don't really care about the, the $2 in parking that you're paying. They want your credit card number, because they're going to either take that and sell it on the dark web, or they're going to go and make fraudulent transactions. Quick story. Right after the pandemic, a lot of restaurants didn't have paper menus, right? They all had, QR codes that you could scan to get your menu. Well, these Chinese nationalist bad actors, they knew that was the case, and so they identified a restaurant near an FBI field office, and they knew a lot of the FBI agents would go to the restaurant right next door for lunch. Well, what those Chinese nationalists did, they infiltrated the restaurant's website, and they installed malware into their menu and onto that QR code, so anytime those FBI agents would go to that restaurant during lunch and scan the QR code with their FBI devices, they were having malware downloaded onto their device. And so that just kind of talks about the sophistication of these cyber criminals and their capabilities and what they're able to do. So, there's different QR code apps out there. If you're looking at downloading one or getting a new one, some of them do have filters in place that will scan the QR code before it actually takes you to it, because other things that they try to deploy with these QR code scams is, you scan the QR code and it takes you to download an app, or it takes you to a website where you can, download a file. Well, you're downloading malicious malware, right? You're downloading a malicious app or downloading, a malicious file. So just things to be aware of. And then on the next slide, talk about SIM swapping, and we've really seen an uptick in this recently, and it's a great way to bypass multi-factor authentication. So you go to a website, you put in your username, you put in your password, and then you get texted that one-time passcode. Well, if I do a SIM swapping attack and I go to your carrier and say, hey, I lost my phone, I need to port my number over to a new device, well, those one-time passcodes, they're going to be texted to my phone rather than your phone. And so that's how these attackers are bypassing. To kind of identify it is, if you aren't getting phone calls, if you aren't getting text messages, if you don't have any cellular signal, call your wireless carrier immediately. Also, making sure that you have a PIN set up with your wireless carrier. So if someone tries to port your number over to a new device, they have to provide that PIN. So that adds an additional layer of security. I want to talk about AI threats. I touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but like I said, with the emergence of AI, it's going to make the speed, the sophistication, the accuracy, a lot of these attacks a lot more believable. And we saw that last year when a UK engineering firm, one of their employees who was in their Hong Kong office, he received an meeting invite to join a conference call to discuss a highly confidential transaction. Well, when he got into that video conference, he saw that he was joined by the CFO and other executives in the organization. And he wasn't like an entry-level employee, but he worked in the finance department. And they said, we need your help, carrying out this, very important, highly confidential transaction. We need you to wire $25 million to this bank in Hong Kong. Well, the employee went ahead and did it. Thinks, hey, I'm going to be, really impressing the executives of my organization, because of course he's not going to say no. He's not going to. They tell me to keep it a secret. I'm not going to tell anyone about it. And then what ended up happening, these attackers were using AI deepfake videos. So that engineering firm, on their website, they had videos of all the executives in the organization. And then those cyber criminals, they took those videos to make AI deepfake clones, and then had those images, had those videos used within this video conferencing. So the employee thought he was talking to all executives when he was actually talking to AI recreations. And it just kind of goes to talk about, again, the sophistication of what these criminals are able to do. And that was a year ago. And think about how the technology has advanced in a year, and think about how it's going to advance in 5 years. So if you're asked to join a conference call using video conference technology that you've never used before, or you're being asked to, send a high dollar, transaction, making sure that you're not bypassing any controls. You always have, dual authorization on a lot of these transactions. And again, like if something, seems suspicious or too good to be true, question it, right? Let your common sense overtake you and say, hey, let me take, an extra 5 seconds or 10 seconds to go, pick up the phone, or just, take a closer look at this. Because again, they created that sense of urgency. Hey, we need you to do this now, or maybe you're going to lose your job, right? Well, that just doesn't seem right. So I want to talk about on this next slide another case study related to ransomware. And I'm sure you've all heard about ransomware. It's really the big business. We've seen a huge uptick, especially since the pandemic, where it was right after the pandemic when individuals were being targeted with ransomware, when these criminals would hack someone's computer and say, hey, if you want your kids' newborn photos or your wedding photos or videos, if you want those back, you have to send us $300 in Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency. Well, those cyber criminals quickly realized that there's a lot bigger fish in the sea for them to go after, and so they started going after organizations who can't afford the downtime. Just think of like large institutions that are mainly dealing with technology and data, and if they can't operate, if they don't have access to their data, then they can't run as a business. And we've even seen over the years organizations shut down because they've been impacted by ransomware, but yet they don't have the funds to pay the ransom to get their data back. So they just really have to shut down. And it really becomes a big business, not only for the ransomware gangs, but then you have forensic investigation companies, you have incident response companies, you have lawyers that deal with a lot of this. You even have what are called ransomware negotiation companies. There's one company out there called Coveware, where if your organization is impacted by ransomware, you can call them, and then they'll negotiate with these ransom gangs. And basically, say they're asking for $1 million in Bitcoin. Well, the negotiation company would go in and maybe negotiate that down to $500,000 for a $250,000 fee. So, at the end of the day, the ransom group is getting their money. The ransomware negotiation group is getting their money. So it really becomes a highly valuable, interconnected business. And on the next slide, we just kind of get into a little bit about ransomware is. Just want to level set on that. So essentially happens when a phishing email is sent to an employee and that employee clicks on the link or opens up a malicious attachment, and then that malware is downloaded onto your computer and into your network. And a lot of times, these cyber criminals will kind of sit and wait. You won't see anything immediate. They're just kind of sitting and waiting, looking to see where the data is, who has access to it, who are the privileged users, and then once they get access to it and get all the data they can get, they'll encrypt it all so you can't access that data, and basically it shuts down all your systems. And then they hold that data ransom until you can pay. And then you either have to fail over to really good backups, which is really expensive, or you can pay the ransom to get your data back. But because you're not dealing with the most ethical people, there's no guarantee that if you pay, you're going to get your data back. And we'll see that in the example on the next slide, which happened to one of the, probably the U.S.'s largest healthcare insurance provider, United Health Group. One of their subsidiaries, Change Healthcare, they were impacted by ransomware last year, and they had a vulnerability within their Active Directory infrastructure where bad actors got into their network on February 12th, and then because it was a Russian ransomware group, and then they just sat and wait. They didn't do anything for 9 days, and then they struck. And United Health Group and their Change Healthcare subsidiary, they weren't able to get their operations up for 4.5 weeks. So imagine, what that would happen, to any, especially a large business like United Health Group if one of their largest subsidiaries couldn't operate for 4.5 weeks. And then the ransomware group, they wanted a $22 million ransom. Well, United Health Group, they paid it because they needed the data back, because a lot of that data is, sensitive health records, right? A lot of, PHI, personal health information. And the ringleaders of that ransomware gang, they took that $22 million and then ran off. Well, the rank and file of the ransomware group, they were kind of left like, well, where's my money? And so they threatened Change Health with another data. They basically said, if you don't give us another ransom, we're going to expose all of your personal health information that we have access to. So they ended up having to pay a second ransom to stop that data breach happening. So, really it just kind of goes to show you that, again, when you pay the ransom, it's not 100% guarantee that you're going to get your data back or you're not going to experience a data breach. But also it kind of goes to show you the financial impacts. It's not just, the downtime from the business. You have, reputational costs, you have legal costs, you have remediation costs. United Health Group, their stock price dropped, 13% over a 6-week period, and over 100 million people had their personal information impacted. And it's estimated that when you look at all the costs that they incurred from, notifying all the impacted individuals, providing credit monitoring, it cost almost $2.5 billion. And that's why, we advise all of our clients, making sure you have an incident response plan, making sure you're prepared for, because really nowadays it's a matter of when and not if. And so making sure you have a plan in place. Who are the decision makers? Who are you going to call? Do you have a cybersecurity company on retainer? Do you have outside counsel? Do you have any insurance companies that you need to call? Right? Making sure you're thinking about those in advance and having that in your incident response plan. Who are your decision makers? Are you going to be contacting law enforcement like the FBI? And I always, it's always a great idea to include informing the law enforcement, because the FBI, they get engaged in a lot of different ransomware incidents, and they've worked with organizations who have paid the ransom and gotten access to those decryption keys. Well, maybe if the FBI has access to those decryption keys and you're impacted, well, maybe you can get access to that same decryption key and not have to pay the ransom. So, just things to think about. And making sure if you do have an incident response plan, making sure you're testing it. You're having these conversations, up front before you're in the middle of an incident, because you don't want to be in the middle of an incident looking at your incident response plan and like, oh, who's supposed to be doing what? Or, oh, we need to call this person because they're decision maker, but, they're on, a vacation in Mexico and we can't, get them right now, right? So, these are all the things you want to talk about. We even see some companies as part of their incident response plan, they know that they're going to have to pay the ransom. And so they'll have a cryptocurrency account open and, it's funded with, maybe $1 million in Bitcoin because they know that they're going to have to pay. And when you're faced with a ransom and you're given 24, 48, 72 hours to pay, it's incredibly difficult to open up a cryptocurrency account and then purchase all of that cryptocurrency, get it funded into your account, and then be able to pay it out to the ransom groups. So, and things to think about. So I want to talk about some, cybersecurity best practices. We've talked a lot about, passwords, multi-factor authentication, but really, I really want to just reemphasize how important that is. Also, making sure you're, bringing a lot of this awareness to your employees. On a monthly basis, Wells Fargo does phishing tests for all its employees just to make sure that a lot of this is top of mind. And they're also being trained on the latest tactics and techniques where, it doesn't, you're not helping anyone if you're sending, easily detectable phishing emails out with, a bunch of spelling errors. You want to make those tests as realistic as possible. I know the ones that we send out that get the highest click rates are the ones that have anything to do with, HR, benefits, payroll, because those are the ones that people like, oh, my direct deposit information got changed. Let me click on that link right away and let me go check it out because I don't remember doing that. So, those things where, it's really important to you are the ones that always, get clicked on. And, well, guess what? Those criminals know that as well. And so those are the techniques that they use. And also, making sure that you're, educating your employees on, the latest tactics and techniques so that they have awareness around, what these, how these cyber criminals are attacking their victims. Making sure if you are giving, training, I like to see organizations do, 15 minutes of training for, each quarter instead of, just 60 minutes once a year where, you just kind of hit click play or you're just going through the slides and, you're, looking at your email, you're not really paying attention, trying to keep it top of mind because if you think about, if you gave training in January 2020 and then you didn't do training again until January 2021, well, the threat environment changed drastically with the COVID pandemic and people working from home and the new techniques and the tactics that these criminals were using. So really, a lot of times, employees are referred to as the weakest link in the cybersecurity chain, but I like to refer to employees as the first and last line of defense because 9 out of 10 attacks involve phishing email in some form or another, and those phishing emails are going to your employees. So making sure that they're aware of how to spot a phishing email, how to report it, things to look out for, what those red flags are is, just so important. And then, mobile device safety. Everyone has a phone, but if you have, any sensitive information on your phone, making sure you have a passcode applied and making sure you're using a 6-digit passcode because if you think about it, a 4-digit passcode, there's 1,000 different combinations. 6-digit passcode, there's 1 million different combinations. So something simple like that is just an easy way to protect your personal information, your device from someone getting into it and stealing your information. And then making sure that you're having antivirus installed on all your devices. Making sure that, on your computer you have it set to automatically update, those antivirus signatures because those cyber criminals are always going to be a step ahead. It's kind of definitely like a game of whack-a-mole where they're coming out with a new malware and then the antivirus companies are coming up with the signature to identify that malware or that virus. And so making sure you're continuously refreshing and updating your antivirus software. And then also just being aware of what information you're sharing online. There's, after we're done today, there's a website, it's called truepeoplesearch.com. Go out there, search your name or family member's name, and you have to put in the name and the city that they live in, or you can put in a specific address, and you'll be amazed by how much information is out there about all of you. It's not 100% accurate, but a lot of times it'll have where you live, the equity you have in your home, how much your home is worth, who lives at that address with you, where you used to live, who your relatives are, what your phone number is, what your email is, what your old, if you have any past phone numbers and emails. There's just a treasure trove of information. And just think about how, that information in the wrong hands, it could be used to get, another piece of information, and then another piece of information. And then it kind of snowballs from there for someone to carry out a very believable and sophisticated, social engineering attack or phishing attack to make you to do something that you normally wouldn't do. And we see, a huge increase in like romance scams or grandparent scams or crypto scams where people are losing their life savings. And there was a website about 15 years ago. It was called pleaserobme.com. And essentially it took all that publicly available information from like property tax records where people lived, and then it correlated it with what people were posting on social media like Facebook and saying, oh, I can't wait to go to spring break next week to Mexico. And then it would show up on a map where these people lived, where they were going, how long they were going to be out of town for, where they lived. And it just kind of goes to show you, a simple benign post like, I'm excited for my spring break trip, how it could be, used against you. So with that, I'll stop to see if there's any questions. Or did I scare all of you?
We do have microphones, so please raise your hand and we'll bring it to you.
Hey, Michelle.
What was that website again where we can check our information?
TruePeopleSearch.com. TruePeopleSearch.com. And there's a bunch of like different websites out there. Some you have to pay, but that one I find to be the most accurate, and it's free. No, you don't have to put in your social.
All right, stop that. My question is, what's the best antivirus program that you found?
Yeah. So do your research, right? I mean, if you're looking for antivirus, you just Google, best antivirus software, right? Any of the ones that are, reputable, like McAfee, Symantec, Kaspersky, they're all very reputable. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure you're continuously updating to the latest version, because a lot of times they're sharing information amongst each other. So if one finds a new virus or a new malware, well, they're going to be sharing that information with the other companies, because really it takes a team when it comes to battling all these bad actors. I mean, Wells Fargo, we're part of what's called the FSISAC, so the Financial Services Information Sharing Consortium. And essentially, anytime we get new cyber threat intelligence, we're sharing it with our peer banks, because if someone sees something, it's very important to be able to share that, and then vice versa. So, anytime with those antivirus companies, any of the reputable ones are good.
Is there a way to, I want to say, like, redact information that is online already, like after doing that True People search or something, and being able to like figure out a way to take that offline somehow? Other than increasing our like password security from what we have already.
I mean, that it really has nothing to do with like passwords. It's really, if you take out a mortgage and that mortgage is registered with your county, and then all that information is public, and then they're just pulling all that data down. So I think like the best way to be able to do that is paying off your mortgage, unfortunately, because then it's that mortgage won't be registered with the county anymore, and then it won't be in the next data feed. And that's really what I've seen from my experience, unfortunately. But like if you're worried about your personal information being exposed, if you ever get a report of like your personal information being on the dark web, one of the best things you can do is setting up a credit freeze, with the 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and setting up that credit freeze, because if you have that credit freeze set up, then even if I gave you my name and social security number, you can't open up a line of credit, because those, if I go apply for a mortgage or a car loan, they're going to be using my credit history from those credit bureaus. Well, if I have a credit freeze set up, then you can't run a credit report and you can't open up a line of credit. You have to set up an account with each of the credit bureaus, and it's a little bit of a pain to thaw out your credit if you do need a new line of credit. But I have 2 boys that are 4 and 6, and I have their credit frozen because they're not going to need their credit for a long time, and there's just really no point in leaving it unprotected. So it's free to use. So that's just another great way to protect your information, because even if you have information on the dark web, you can't get it off the dark web, but you're limiting a lot of your risk by using either a credit alert or a credit freeze.
So a lot of us, multiple times a year, will get a letter saying, hey, your information's been exposed, here's free credit protection for a year. What do you propose with those? Do you sign up for it? Do you ignore them? What's your
So before I got into this role, I led at Wells Fargo what's called the Compromised Data Incident Response Team. So my team would investigate all those incidents anytime someone's personal information was breached, and we would send out those credit monitoring letters, and then we would notify the regulators as well. You'd be amazed at how few people actually redeem the free credit monitoring. I'd say it's about 5% of the people that receive those letters actually redeem the credit monitoring. And I don't know if that's because they already have credit monitoring, if they think it's a scam, or they just don't care because it's happened to them so many times. I would say like a lot of those credit monitoring, like LifeLock or what they're selling, I wouldn't say that, I don't think there's a huge benefit to it. I think if you're setting up a credit freeze with those credit bureaus, it's going to be doing a lot of that protection for you. I mean, it could give you a peace of mind, and if you have had identity theft in the past, it's not a bad deal, because if you get a year or 2 free credit monitoring, and then your ID is your identity is stolen, they can help with any remediation and fixing your credit if you have a line of credit open up under your credit report that's fraudulent. So it's kind of like a personal decision, but there are benefits, but not all the time it's super helpful. Yes.
Change the title and take out a mortgage? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. It's a very unique, scam where it's title fraud. I think a lot of the ways you can protect your property is having a mortgage on it, because if you have a mortgage on it, it's incredibly difficult to, take that over, right? Where we're seeing it is properties that are owned outright, and then those titles can be transferred. There are, companies out there that do provide like title protection. I haven't done a ton of research about it, but if you're, something that you're interested in, you think it might be right for you, maybe just Google it and do a little research. But I think sometimes the risk is overblown, where you hear a couple reports, but it's not like happening at a really high rate. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Justin. Justin, thanks so much for sharing with us. That was great, eye-opening and scary. How many of y'all just checked that website? You now know your business is out there. I see those hands. No, thanks. Seriously, that was a great reminder and a reality check on things we can immediately do. having those solid passwords. I'm feeling a little guilty about my four-number password that I share with everyone freely because I was annoyed when I had to add it. And our multi-factor authentication that just changed, so maybe we can be a little more patient as we authenticate every single day for our Okta login. But, Lord, let it be true that you can protect us that way. But, okay, I have a couple of things before our next speaker. So first, I've got yet another lost and found item. This is bracelet or anklet. It's found in the parking lot. If you lost one or you have a friend who isn't here this afternoon but was here this morning, maybe text them. You can describe it and I'll give it to you. Otherwise, we're going to give it to the church. The next thing is there's supposed to be a QR code coming back on the screen. No, don't do it. Because we are here for your secret info. I know. I knew that was coming, like I'd seen Justin's slides, and I was like, they are going to be suspicious about all these QR codes we keep providing. So the good news is we already on your phone, we already on your computer, we already know all your secrets. So this is your chance to ask Kent his secrets. Not really, although he is probably pretty open. So this QR code is for questions. If you have any questions for Kent as the new CFO, for questions for Kent about any of the content today, any of the content he shares during this next time. So we're going to leave that on while I keep chattering in case you want to at least pull it up. It's a form that you can fill out during his talk. We'll take questions at the end. So as some context, as we wrap up day 2, we have covered a ton of ground. We've looked at AI, we've looked at finance and technology, cybersecurity, the future of finance with the Hackett Group. And one thing is very clear, the landscape is changing constantly. It's changing rapidly, and there are risks, but there's also a lot of possibilities and a lot of change coming. Earlier, we heard from the SFLs as I sat on the panel, and they shared about how they're thinking of what's ahead. But now we're going to hear from Kent and what he thinks about the future of the finance of CRU. We didn't want you to leave without hearing what our new CFO is thinking about for the future. So, will you join me in welcoming Kent?
All right. We were contemplating what my theme music should be coming up because this group needs a little wake-up music. I will suggest, seriously, you don't have to do this, but I highly encourage that you get up for a second and stretch out a little bit, jog in place, raise the roof, whatever you want to do. Get your juices flowing. You need a little adrenaline. I got plenty up here, but I can't share it with you. All right. All right, I got 5 points. I'm going to try to do it in under 30 minutes so that we can have some Q&A on the back end of this. We'll see what you send in. Wendy's going to filter any crazy stuff so I don't have to answer it. And we'll see how it goes. And then, what you're really waiting for to get out of here, we'll get done. So if you think about what today has been, some of the talks that we've had come in, the cybersecurity this morning, the Hackett study, some of you, or maybe even several of the breakout sessions, you might feel like this is really kind of stretching me up, right? Part of the reason we get you in is actually we want to raise that. We've used this phrase, Steve Hackney and I got it from a strategy consultant, but we want to raise the altitude of our thinking. And so that doesn't just apply to what we're trying to bring to you today, but it also applies to me and everyone else on the team. So several of the Hackett, I've been to Hackett conferences. Usually Hackett's a best practice conference, and that's the primary reason we're going to them. I'll go to a Gartner conference, and that's about technology. So last year we went to a Gartner conference, and they were talking, everything was chatting about the future of AI. And so as you engage, we're not expecting that everything that they're sharing is applicable to you, but try to apply as much as you can and think, what questions can I be asking? Because the real thing is, in your role, whatever your role is it's a challenge to you to continue to think, how can I learn? How can I press? How can I improve what I'm working on? So as you think about finance as we go forward in the fall, as Mark was transitioning out, if you don't know, Mark Trenagle was our former CFO. I was texting him earlier today. He wishes he were here. He was jealous. Of course he is. This is awesome. So as I was asked pretty quickly, Kent, as the finance function is going forward, what are you kind of passionate about the future of finance? And I gave 2 answers which will be encompassed in what I'm going to share. But there was 2 things I felt like for me as I look forward that I really want to see God do in us and through us in the next several years. And those 2 things are, I'd really like to see PeopleSoft replaced. Now, I'm starting right in this. You thought the cybersecurity was scary. Some of you thinking, what did he just say? PeopleSoft replaced. And I wanted to see the next generation of leaders raised up in finance. Right? Those are 2 things that are really on my heart, and you'll see that in what we're going to share. So I want to pull back up if I can. Let's go to the next slide here. So what does the future look like in finance and CRU? Next slide. Well, first off, whatever our future looks like is going to continue to stand with our purpose in finance, which if you don't know, over the years we've tried to have our U.S. finance staff memorize this. It's probably good for all of us to be familiar with it, but here it is. We are about accelerating spiritual movements by expanding operational capacity. Expanding the operational capacity for CRU, and specifically for our staff, so they can spend more of their time doing ministry and less of their time doing what we do. With the ultimate goal to be movements everywhere so everyone knows someone who truly follows Jesus. Right? So then this morning we're combining that, our ministry focus. In finance, we combine our ministry focus with financial expertise. And that's been the challenge that I've been a part of, and those of you who've been here a while, for 30 years, trying to think, how can we be really good at finance and have CRU be a first-class finance organization without losing our heart in ministry? And that's the goal of what we're doing. So as you look at the Hackett top 10 from this morning, and I look forward, there's 5 things I think that we need to continue to focus on in order to be effective in ministry. I'll highlight, if you're in U.S. finance, especially you're on the leadership team, everything I'm about to say is going to sound familiar. It just so happens it lines up with what Hackett's research is telling us about what other organizations need. So we're not alone in needing to pursue these things. So the 5 things I'm going to emphasize, I've check-marked them. I don't need to repeat what they're saying today. I'm going to say them in my own words, because this is the high-level language to make them sound smart when they're at a conference. So let's give you more language for us, starting with point number 1 of the 5 things we need to pursue. So the number 1 thing we need to pursue is modernizing technology. You might be asking, well, why? Well, the reality is about 7 years ago, we did some research on PeopleSoft and our tool. And at the time, you probably heard everything was going to the cloud. And if you're watching TV, every business is moving their finances to the cloud. Everybody needs to be in the cloud. Well, we actually went to conferences, did our own research, asked our own experts, and we said, do we really need to move into the cloud right now? What are the advantages? And what we actually heard back was, well, actually not yet. What you have in PeopleSoft is actually more robust than what's in the cloud, and you don't need to move your systems there yet. And so, unlike some other organizations that moved right away, we made the decision to wait and squeeze every last dollar out of the system that we're in. And we're still squeezing the sponge, right? That's where we are right now. But the sponge is getting kind of old and moldy, right? And so, practically speaking, what that means is a lot of the tools that we use, a lot of the new technology that's come out in the last 10 years has not been built with natural integrations that work with our system. And so we're in this process right now of thinking, when is the right time to replace PeopleSoft financials? So I'm not telling you there's a project tomorrow and being up front talking to you. Well, there's a project today, but I'm not telling you we're moving tomorrow, right? But we are doing some research on when to move. So if you go to the next slide. So that research, you met Matt from Hackett earlier this morning. He's a part of the Hackett group. We have engaged them on a project to evaluate our systems and basically to speak back to us how we're doing. How's our processing time? What are our systems giving us compared to the best practices out in the market? What's available that we're not using? And so we're in the part of a study to look at that information. So that's a Hackett benchmark on the left that's due to get results later this month, okay? Then we're going to move into phase 0 in our research. What is phase 0? Oracle actually provides this service where they match your needs, your business needs, to their products, and they tell you how they would do things differently if they were able to provide that product to you. They do this for free. I don't know if they do it for free for everyone, but they're going to do it for free for us. And so we're going to get this incredible research that's going to use cases that we've put together and actually speak to how they would do it differently in our system, which is going to be incredibly valuable. Then in May, we're going to have we're going to arrange with some of the big ERP providers. What's ERP? It's enterprise solutions, the finance systems that are out there. They're going to put together demos for us. They're going to come in and they're going to show us what their products can do, and we're going to learn what we're missing. All right, and then sometime after that, we might go to request for proposal where we actually go out for bid and decide we're going to move forward with buying it. So I wanted you to be aware of that. PeopleSoft, it was never the intent when we bought PeopleSoft in 2001, or whenever it was, to be on it forever. That was never the intent. We've gotten 20 plus years out of the product. Now it's time to take a step back and say, when's it time to move on, all right? So let's give you another look here. So one thing I want you to be aware of in this is one of the potential advantages of this going forward. So on the left, you'll see where we are today. Oracle, PeopleSoft, CRU's current PeopleSoft system utilizes several bolt-on software packages. So what that means is you pay an incremental cost for every package that you have on. In the ideal world, we'd be taking the system that we buy and we'd use most of what's in that system to do what we need, and then have a couple bolt-ons. It's probably not going to be perfect, and that's what tomorrow looks like. We think there's an opportunity to save as much as, we've already looked at HR, and there's an opportunity to save as much as $1 million a year in service fees for the HR systems that are out there. So we expect to see something less, but maybe similar in the finance space. We'll still have to make a decision, though, when the time comes. Do we want Concur, which, in spite of the fact that some people don't like it, is the best of the best, and there's no debate. There's no debate as to whether Concur is the best product. Whether their service is any good, there's no debate. It's terrible. But their product is amazing, and so we'll have to make some decisions like that. So that's the modernized technology. So the second bullet point that's going to come up here is in order to take advantage of this technology and all the reporting we need to do, we need to re-engineer our chart fields. So what does that mean? We had an original design and intent and how we built the chart fields. I was here for it. I've been here forever. I was not an accountant back then, but I remember sitting across the hall from the conference room that people kept going in as they talked about chart fields, and it was a painful process. It was a painful process. And so fast forward, we had this design. It was nice. It was going to work sweet. We knew what operating units were supposed to do, right? And then as time went on, everybody got more creative and more unique, and people set it up their own way. And now, if you go to the next slide, we have 35,000 possible combinations. That's a minimum. We had it as an estimate. Probably more than that, chart field combinations. It takes 9,000 hours a year to change chart field errors. It takes another 8,000 to deal with journal uploads. It's a mess. So we asked Nate Miller and the team in the TCOE, shout out to Nate and team, to help us lead a project of looking at our chart fields and coming back and giving us some feedback on how we can improve them. But one big example of how this impacts is from a reporting standpoint. This is the data cleansing that was on the Hackett side, right? One of the big impacts here is if you want to write a report that crosses business units, you have to do an incredible amount of research just to be able to write it, because everybody's using something different. So let's say, and Nate would do this much better than me. I'm not going to give you justice, bro. But if I wanted to look at a report on all activity in Houston area, you know, I can't just look at one operating unit. I have to find everybody's different iteration of the operating unit that they created for Houston. Now, why do we need to look at Houston? I don't know. But the point is building reports is complicated. I asked for a report for the capacity areas. The capacity finance team built that report for us from a budget standpoint. This is just in capacity areas at Lake Hart. You wouldn't think it was that much different. It took them 80 hours to build this report. So the time saving that's available to us is incredible in this space. All right, third opportunity, let's move on, is upskilling our financial staff. You probably got a taste of that today, but what do we mean by upskilling? There has been a lot of new technology that has come out, some of which that we're using, that allows us to do finances easier, faster, better, right? Here's a look at some of them. You can see it here on this next slide. So there's upskilling in foundational skills. That's just basic analytical problem solving, that kind of stuff, data storytelling. There's, at the second level, there's role-specific skills, the ability to use accounting tools, process automations, Power BI, iCertis, those types of tools. And then at the top level, there's the ability to use some of the future stuff that's coming out, RPA, artificial intelligence, and the like. So all of us the finance function is transitioning, and what's happened is it's been a while since we've had the radical kind of transition that we're having right now with a lot of new tools. And so my daughter, she just graduated with an accounting degree from UCF. Yes, accounting. Way to go, Lindsay. So she, as a part of her regular classwork, we're using these tools that we're trying to learn. And so what we're going to need to do is work as a team to try to make sure everybody has an understanding of how to use those skills. And the U.S. finance team, we're calling that pathways, where we're evaluating where people are, what they need for their roles, and we're identifying what they need to learn. We had an initiative this past year to get 13 people trained in how to use Power BI. That's just an example of the kind of thing we need to think organizationally as it relates to U.S. finance. All right, so fourth priority here, keeping the thing moving, is we need to reduce operational costs. So I don't have a bunch of slide information on this, but I did want to hear, one of our former presidents, Steve Douglas, comment on this. So here you go. Steve says, effectiveness is actually a written value of Campus Crusade for Christ. It is a value because Bill Bright has made it so for 50 years. Bill has been in the process of finding what works best. A good working definition of effectiveness is that which brings the best result for the effort and funds expended. Campus Crusade is always searching for faster, better, less expensive ways to get the good news of Jesus to who have not heard. We do not want capacity, we do not want operations to be the biggest cost. That's not what we're here for. We're here to make the mission of CRU, Win, Build, Send, the front and center piece of what we're doing. In order to do that, we're going to have to continue to look for ways to be more cost effective. Just do the math. As sitting in the CFO seat doing a board report this month, inflation and the amount of new money that we're raising, inflation's slightly winning on the macro. What does that mean every year? At least for now, until our donations outpace inflation, we have less money to spend than we did last year. The cost of operating this ministry has to go down. We have to find more efficient ways to do it. Nobody but this group, this group gets that, right? That's what we're looking for. All right, fifth priority, the last one here. We need to be valued ministry partners. That's the top of the ministry star, the finance star, right? That ministry connection. When we're meeting with leaders, we need to help bring value to them and making good decisions. And so if you look at this next slide, it's a little busy. I'm not going to cover all of it, but we want to move from accurate and timely reporting, which is a good thing, right? It's kind of important. We don't actually want to put inaccurate, untimely reports out. That's not going to do anybody any good, although every once in a while it happens. But we want to have value-creating conversations that impact Win, Build, Send. So if you just kind of look at the movement, we want to move from the bottom, accurate, timely reporting, up to better cost, compliance and control, to cost and efficiency, to strategic planning, all the way up to value creation. We want to innovate, identify and innovate solutions for the ministry. So this is where this is what we're going to be focusing on as we go forward, as we think about what our strategy is. Some of that, you might have come into this room and maybe I said PeopleSoft has got to go away one day, and this was a shock to you. You're hoping we could use it forever, Michelle. But and maybe some of you were hoping it went away years ago and you can't wait. But we're going to work on these 5 things as we go together as a finance function, and then we're going to be sensitive to what God might bring along the way that's different that we need to focus on as well. So that's kind of the where we're going at this point as of February 2025 in CRU Finance. So now I'm going to take the rest of my time here. I did that in 20 minutes, man. I beat my 30-minute mark. Whoop! I knew you guys were tired. I'm trying. That's fast. So can we bring back up the questions QR that nobody wants to use now, thanks to the gentleman before me? All right, what questions do you have? Let's start with the ones that were sent in before I got up. So in this time, what I really wanted to do, and I requested it, I thought, you may have come in with a question, can be about anything, what's something happening macro, how's CRU doing financially? Please don't get so down to a specific thing that you want to know what chart field to use. I don't know. That's why we're having a chart field project. But, at the macro level, what are some questions you have about things that are happening financially in CRU or anything else that I can help you with? All right. What do we got?
All right, your first question, Kent, is you worked with Mark for a number of years. What are a few things that you learned from him?
What did I learn from Mark? It's interesting because in many ways, Mark and I learned together because we kind of grew up in our finance time side by side. And just for those of you, if you haven't had a chance to ask me, the biggest impact in having the old CFO leaving CRU was that my friend Mark was leaving CRU. So it took me a good month just to come to grips with the reality that he was leaving. And he's a friend. Bob McLeod used to throw out some hours that we served together. I can't even do the math on the number of hours that Mark and I served together. But a couple things I learned from Mark. One, Mark had the back of the people that he worked with. So if something went wrong, he didn't blame shift. He stepped in front of it and he owned it on behalf of the whole. And that's something I always held dear, I think, with the people that worked with him, is that he was willing, he was always willing to put himself in front and say, we're in this together. So and then the second thing was tenacity. Mark, if he believed in something was right, he was going to stand up for it. He was going to say it out loud. He was going to hopefully do it respectfully, but he was going to make sure that it was heard. And in that sense, I want to make sure that as I go forward, one of the things I've always tried to practice as I've seen him do it is being willing to say the hard things that nobody wants to hear, if it's responsible to do so. So There's a couple of that. I mean, I could go on a long list, but I'm not going to stand up here forever on that question. What's next?
One more question related to your transition to CFO. What was the hardest question you got during the review process, the CFO interview process? Sorry.
What was the hardest question? Well, I don't know it was the hardest single question, but if you don't know, there was a process. It was a very real process. I got sent a questionnaire that looked like the heavy 360 review process that took me 2.5 hours to fill out. So I would say that was probably the hardest part of the process. And this is not in any hopefully this doesn't come across as arrogant in any way, but I think walking beside Mark for as long as I have been and being here 30 years, I don't think there was a lot of surprises in what the CFO job is. That doesn't mean I jumped at the idea of doing it right away. It's probably quite the opposite. It's a little sobering to know it's a big responsibility, and yet it comes back to it's what we talked about this morning. It's not solely my responsibility. It's something hopefully I turn over to the Lord and just step out in faith and follow him. Hopefully that's not a non-answer, but doing the best I can.
So structurally, how will your responsibilities as CFO look similar to how Mark had it structured versus different? And what will the role of the controller look like moving forward?
So great questions. Let me talk about what I experienced. Thanks for asking these questions, by the way. What I experienced in the last 3 months. So I was interim for 3 months. And I went into it thinking, I worked alongside Mark for years. In a real sense, I was performing kind of as a number 2 position. Mark and I sat next to each other for many of those years. So there was I was very well informed as to what was happening financially in the organization and what leadership thought about where we were going financially. So I was kind of wondering myself in October, Mark stepped out. I got asked pretty much right away, Kent, hey, makes logical sense. Will you do this interim role? I said, well, I guess. So I jumped into it, and I thought to myself, there's probably not going to be a lot of new stuff I need to know. I'm wondering what this is going to be like. It could be a lot of work, may not, I don't know. So what I immediately realized, knowing that I wouldn't be doing some of the things Mark was doing, like I wasn't asked at that time to lead some of the other departments other than finance that Mark was doing, because he was doing something beyond just the CFO role, and I wasn't asked to do those things. So what I learned is probably what I thought. My focus the last many years, since 2014, has largely been running the function of finance in the U.S. organization, right? So we think legally, not as maybe as we do missionally. Legally, everything under CCCI, the corporation, I was a big part of the day-to-day and making sure all that was happening. I went to the board meetings like Mark did, so I've been going to the board meetings for years. I was familiar with all that. What Mark did was Mark looked external to the finance function. I looked internal and worked to lead the team. He met with all the leaders. And so it was kind of gauging how much time does it take to meet with everybody who has questions in the organizational leadership at the executive level. And I'll tell you, it takes a lot of time. So in that 3-month period, I figured it was about a half person's job just meeting with, connecting with, answering questions with those other leaders. And so while there wasn't a lot going on I didn't know, there were a lot of conversations that I didn't have. And so as I think about the adjustments to what needs to happen with the role going forward, I don't know that we need to radically change how we're doing finances and CRU. I've been here, I've been a part of building this. I mean, we'll look for improvements. I just gave you 5 things I think we need to work on. So that's on the radar, but it's more thinking about how do we create capacity? In particular, how do I pick up 50% of a person's job in the way we're organizing the teams? And there have been some things that have been open items that we knew we needed to kind of work on and deal with structurally since the summer, that because of Mark's being in transition and then me being interim, we haven't really worked with. I don't think so look, if you're in U.S. finance, we're going to do after several months of getting input and having conversations, because I don't make decisions alone. I make them in community with collaboration. I'm a verbal processor, so even if I wanted to make them alone, I probably would struggle to do it. But we're going to have conversations, and we're going to look at the org chart, and we're going to figure out what needs to be tweaked or changed in order for us to create the capacity we need to do it going forward. I'm not going to give you specific answers to that question because I don't know. I just found out I was the CFO in the month of February, so we're gonna take a look at it and make some decisions as we're going forward.
Follow-up questions to get you to say what I want you to say. I'm fine with you
Why
not.
don't you just say it?
I am. I'm fine with you not answering the controller. What will it look like? Because you are going to work in collaboration to build out what's around you. But one of the things that might be a question in this room of the responsibilities of the CFO looking different or similar to you and Mark is there were many teams that reported to Mark. And so how does that play out now for this room that hasn't heard you talk about that?
Yeah. So Mark was working with Barrett Brown, which is a consulting team. He was leading that at Lake Hart. He was also leading donation services group, which, both of those areas reported to him. He was joint leading capacity areas, which is all the capacity leaders and giving direction to that. And then he was leading finance. And obviously finance with the number of staff and the impact was the biggest chunk of what he was responsible for. I'm responsible for the finance function. So in that, if you want to know how I will report to a U.S. Director of Operations or COO, which they're in the process of working through a process to name. That will be the person doing my annual review. But then, of course, I have a relationship and report to the board. I report to the U.S. Director, which is Mark Gauthier, and I report to David Robbins. And so I am leading just finance, which isn't a just. We're a $700 million organization. But I'm leading just finance, and then I have multiple people I report to. And so what you need to know is in doing that, I have access in all of those places. In the last 3 months, I found out just how much. In the month of January, my phone was on speed dial for everybody I just mentioned. So as we were preparing for the board meeting, I was very much involved in those conversations. I have no doubt that I have access to who I need to have access to do this job. And so, but that's how all the reporting relationships will work out. Is that the answer you're hoping for, Wendy? I did say everything else but finance. So donation services, Barrett Brown, anything else that reports to Mark that wasn't U.S. finance will not report to me. And then I have a dotted line relationship to everyone in this room who does financial work that does not report directly to U.S. finance.
All right, so switching gears into the PeopleSoft topic.
Okay.
Thinking about the changes to PeopleSoft and the impact on reporting in the future, what happens to the past 5 to 7 years of financial history, and how will we be able to report year over year or see financial trends as we transition to a new software, potentially?
So the question is, what happens to the data? All right, so I know enough to answer this question, but I am not the expert. So the data is going, the data maps, right? So all of our data is stored in a data warehouse. It's accessible. We actually do not access PeopleSoft directly for a lot of the reporting we already do. So that information is going to be retrievable. We won't lose anything. We'll keep all the history. And as long as we do the project, if we move financial software from one to another, as long as we do the project correctly, we'll be able to report on the history of all of it. Now, anything you got on Excel, that's between you and Excel. Probably not the best place to have it if you have options to have it in something else.
All right, thank you. And then thinking about upskilling our finance staff, as you mentioned, are there plans to make training resources for tools and various skills more available on demand? It can be difficult to find resources without knowing who to ask.
Yeah, so The answer is yes. The difficulty we have at the moment is the learning module side of what we do, which we've been making efforts to as CRU improve for some time, is a part of the HR transformation discussion that's being taking place right now. It's a part of the idea of how can we help staff and CRU exist better as people from a human resource standpoint. And a lot of that is training and learning, et cetera. So we will continue to make things available, videos available. It may not be as that we can make it much easier than it currently is, which is oftentimes upon request, until we really get farther along in the HR transformation discussion that's taking place, or re-envisioning project, I think is the term we're using.
Great. Are there any other nonprofits that'll be a useful benchmark for the upcoming process of doing a financial transformation?
So benchmarking us, so that's a great question, because we had a lot of conversation with Hackett about what our benchmark is. It has never been easy to benchmark CRU. So if you're, there's probably a handful of you in here are like, this is really interesting. What's he going to say? And then the rest of you are like, what is he talking about? So when you hire an outside company to give you a benchmark and tell you how you're doing, you got to compare yourself with something. So how do you compare what we do with other organizations? It's very difficult to do, because if you want someone that's doing a slice of what we do, you can find it. You want someone that's doing campus ministry, well, they're doing it. If you could try, go to focus on the family and maybe have a family comparison. You could, is anybody doing cruises for, family life? I don't know. I don't think that's a thing. But you could, I guess, try to, graft us against Royal Caribbean. So it's a little difficult to build it, but we do go through a process of looking at not-for-profits. Some of them might be schools or hospitals, that the mere aspects of what we do, so that we can kind of have a range of those that are doing, field campus type ministry organizations, and those that are doing another type of not-for-profit that may not logically immediately trigger in your mind. But there's a thorough process that we go through when we select who's in that benchmark. And the benchmark, people we're being benchmarked against are vetted through us. So we had a meeting and discussed who was in the benchmark, and then we made a selection. So if you're curious, that's how it works. It's not a perfect process. So we have, we actually normally do pretty good against our peers. And then there's best in class, which best in class is best in class. That includes whoever the best of the best is out there. It's not just our peer group.
How can our team be praying for you in this new role?
Good question. So, in this season at the moment, there's 1,000 things you could pray for, right? A couple of the things that come to mind, trying to decide how transparent to be in this moment. I'll be pretty transparent. So in the interview process, I was asked what my weaknesses are, and I would say I am functionally or financially arrogant. That's a weakness. And I'm interpersonally insecure. So what does that mean? That means that if you think about the growth model, when I have conversations, I can have a little bit of a tendency to be insecure, not about what I think from a financial standpoint, but am I doing okay? Are we good? You'll have those who work with me the most closely get a lot of those conversations. And so working with new people, I'm going to be processing through, did I say the right thing? Did I hurt your feelings? So you could pray for that. That's a real part of who I am. And at the same time, I got to be really careful, because I've been doing this job for a long time, and I need to stay humble and open to ideas, because there are a lot of people have a lot of good ideas, and I want to make sure that we're open and actually considering them all. And so it's kind of a both and, which is kind of a weird combination. People experience that as weird. If you meet me in a functional meeting, you're gonna interact with somebody that's really confident, thinks they know what they're doing, and stand up here and answer your open questions and say, let's do financial answer time. Bring it on. And then I'll sit there and we'll talk about how we're doing, and I'll leave this room and say, do they like me? Are we okay? And So, you could pray for all the dynamics of that are going on in my mind and my heart right now. And just pray for transition. There is going to be some change that comes with me being in the role and doing some reorganization on the team. And I care very, very deeply about people. And that tends to make my decision making slow because so I can't do a job and a half indefinitely. So there's a little bit of tension between, making some change that creates capacity and making some change that people like and is a good change for them and an opportunity for them to learn and grow. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate your prayers and all that.
Thanks for an honest answer on both of those fronts. Do we have any other questions from the floor? We've got Melanie with the mic and Greg over there with the mic.
Questions, accusations? Just too tired? All right. Well, I will be around. I don't need to drag this out anymore. I'll be around tonight and tomorrow, and look forward to doing Devos with you tomorrow, and we'll see, who can out-putt-putt me tonight, which will be virtually everyone.
Thank you, Kent, for helping us process today's insight and also sharing those big rocks on your mind of replacing PeopleSoft and raising up the next generation of finance leaders and CRU. I know I definitely appreciate the context for why we would consider changing something as big as PeopleSoft Financials that has a domino into the whole of our jobs, as well as an explanation of a thorough process that will take place. It won't be flippantly changed. So thank you for sharing that context with us.
Yes, very much appreciate that. It's been an outstanding day filled with professional development through our guest speakers and our workshops. Kent and our SFLs painted the picture for how CRU Finance is looking ahead and asking the right questions, staying adaptable, thinking strategically about the future and where we're headed. I just want to encourage you, each one, to continue to think about what aspects of today's content might spur on your next step, whether it's mentorship to specific development or training, or if you really wanted to hit all 5 workshops and you didn't have time, but any one of those. So, yeah.
Thanks, Wendy. You didn't use the theme word that I put in your script on that last summary.
I'm
Who
sorry,
knows the
fail.
theme word for today?
Fail. What was our theme word? On your papers. Preparation. I was
That's
supposed
right.
to talk about preparing. Being prepared for
I'm
the
teasing
future.
her to reinforce to you guys today's theme, just to tease. All right, so transitioning to this evening for those who are going to PopStroke, the address is on the calendar invite, or you can just type in PopStroke. There's just one in Orlando. It's on Alafaya. For those of you who are in rental cars provided by the conference, you are welcome to take the toll road. You need not sit in traffic longer than that would take. Once you get there, we do have our own reserved area, so the food will be out buffet style for you to enjoy. And then you can play putt-putt at your leisure. There's not a schedule for when and how you group up or go play. So we mentioned that Pete Johnson wasn't able to be here because his appendix had to get out, but he did send a note for us for risk management.
Yes, he did.
Please be careful as you play putt-putt and risk aware. Do not hit people and look out for uneven surfaces.
They don't want to hear from us after this event.
And I don't think they were joking. So whether you're competitive and are going to come back tomorrow with your scorecard proudly displayed, or you just want to chat and enjoy time with people, we really hope that you each have a great time tonight. And then we'll see you back here, same place, same time. Doors will open at 8:15 and we'll get started at 8:45.
Thanks.